Hello, I'm Brett Azuma, Senior Vice President of Research at 451 Research. We're here at HCTS 2016, having lots of discussions with colo and hosting companies. Today we're here to talk to you a little bit about efficient IT and specifically a special collaboration between Infomart and LinkedIn. I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists. First of all, we have Julian Kudritzki, Chief Operating Officer for the Uptime Institute. Next we have John Sheputis, President of Infomart. So let's start things off. John, tell us a little bit about the Hillsborough data center.
Well, we moved to Hillsborough in 2011, opened the facility in 2012. We thought it would be a growing market due to both costs and climate. And I guess it was about a year ago at this time, LinkedIn said they had a major requirement. And rather than just say it's this size, they said they want to do something special. And usually at this point, I'm trying to figure out whether I'm excited about that or not. But they said, we want to make this a super efficient and for a very dynamic load. In other words, not here's how many servers we have, it's going to run at this utilization forever. They literally said, we're a consumer-facing company, our applications move up and down their utilization, and we want to do something, and this is a key phrase, we wanted to have a facility that could manage to the load.
Interesting, interesting. Julian, you've got an interesting perspective on what efficient IT actually can be, and we often talk about it in terms of PUE or some numbers that I don't quite understand. Talk to us a little bit more about how you see efficient IT.
So, Uptime Institute's approach to efficient IT is how's your organization structured and how ready your organization is to lower cost, manage risk, and to innovate using technology. So unlike the metrics and different pulley sizes on cooling units, where I think the industry has been focused, which is a good thing, now let's go after the lion's share of the opportunity to become more efficient by looking at the entirety of how IT infrastructure comes together and the resources consumed therein.
Okay, great. Now, one of the things you had commented about earlier, John, was how this was really a collaboration with LinkedIn. Tell us a little bit more about, what do you mean when you say that? Vendors always say that when they want more money out of you, so.
You're right. When someone says they want to collaborate or partner, I'm always nervous. Normally, a client would come to you and say, I have this many megawatts or this many racks. And then whatever your facility is, it is, and you just send me your diagrams to show what it is. In this case, they wanted something special. They said, we're going to manage this. We want to have an environment that's much more tightly controlled, right? We're going to make sure we have maximum utilization of our network, of our cooling, and of our power. And to do that, they wanted to essentially customize a large portion of, they wanted to customize part of the electrical, but mainly on the mechanical side. To that extent, it wasn't just a stock, here's our product that's off the truck, how much did you want? This was the phrase they used was, we want to see somebody who can get behind this concept and differentiate themselves in that way. And so we partnered about the design, we partnered on the exact layout, and built a large portion of this from scratch.
Great. I mean, Julian, you've talked to hundreds of data center providers. I mean, how is this kind of the way things normally operate, or is this something new and different?
No, I think that this site is remarkable, not just for how they envision Infomart strategically, but it's I think too often the classic mistake when people talk about efficiency or doing something new is they get into a mimicry mode. Like, how do I do what this person's doing, or how do I do what that person's doing, regardless if it's applicable to them. And I think the LinkedIn story is fascinating because it was really an organizational commitment to change how they develop data centers. And part of the message is, as cool as that data center is, and it's cool, no doubt, it's not go do this, right? The lessons is how did the organization commit to making a change? And when you talk to them and they talked about how they were in a retail environment that wasn't working for them given growth and unique compute loads, they decided to completely re-envision it. And part of that, although it's not very sexy, is looking at cost, looking at resource consumption, and deciding fundamentally to make a change. And that's unique, but I think it's a watershed moment for our industry because others need to not mimic them, but follow the examples and the principles that they adopted.
Well, John, you were also saying that when we talked earlier, you talked about the fact that the collaboration actually enabled you to get to levels of efficiency that really weren't possible before.
People talk about efficiency and they use somewhat static metrics and they talk about something operating in isolation. I'll give you a great example, PUE. PUE describes essentially how efficient the rest of the plant is to supply the IT load, right? So one is the IT, and then the point something is all the other energy. And they describe it under, usually when people report it, they describe it under full load or fairly optimal conditions, because no one wants to report a bad PUE. The reality is, it's a dynamic number. In most well-designed facilities, the more highly loaded the facility is, the better the PUE is. Under low utilization, most, even excellent data centers can have a lousy PUE because the systems are meant to operate in isolation, right? For the operator, we never want the cooling to be insufficient, so we will over-provision even at low loads. That was something that changed with design. They said, we are going to have and I don't want to get into the products, but we're going to have a highly variable load. We know that, right? We don't know which parts of our application are going to become exciting and highly utilized. So they literally, normally when we talk to clients, we say, how many racks, what's the load per rack? And they literally said, we don't know. It's going to be in this range. And so we had to design a power system that could deliver pools of power that could be pulled down at their discretion, and a cooling system that could direct cooling in a very efficient and powerful way. They have racks that literally go from 5 kW to 24 kW without notice.
Interesting.
And the only way to solve that, if you were just blowing a lot of cold air around, would be to use a lot of resources. So we had to redesign this from the start.
Great. Now I noticed when I asked Julian the question about, is this just the way data centers are designed, you kind of blanched a little bit.
Well, yeah, because the answer is yes, except for this one, right? And so, is this a harbinger for the future? For some use cases, it will be, right? I think if you want to be efficient over a broad use case, which is what, we live in an on-demand world, not a constant demand world. And I think designing for that and designing to be efficient is going to force people to challenge some design principles and to take some risk. And hats off to LinkedIn, they did it.
Well, and actually, as we look at data centers, our data centers designed to actually handle the on-demand part of the world? And isn't it ironic that we haven't really designed them to accommodate that well?
It is, but it's designed through essentially over-provisioning, right? So if I've got if I've got mechanical gear that's supplying 20% of the load, or the IT is running at 20% of the expected load, most of your mechanical gear, the air conditioning, the plumbing systems, are going to be inefficient. It takes a lot of design to make something operate. For example, your car, unless you're driving an all-electric car, probably gets better gas mileage on the highway than in the city. And that's just the same engine, right? It's just higher utilization. And that's the way most mechanical systems operate. In this case, we used a technology that's, there's several good providers for. We designed, I think it's the world's largest deployment of the rear door heat exchangers, a chilled door, and it's essentially the cooling unit is on a hinge, and it changes 2 or 3 basic concepts. Rather than containing rows of hot air and cold air, we're containing racks. Rather than distributing large quantities of air, which is hard to move around and hard to direct, we're distributing water. And then, but to get to that efficiency, 2 other things happened. We are actually using fairly warm water, which allows us to not expend much money or energy in cooling it. And we're delivering chilled water at 67 degrees. In a lot of data centers, that's the supply air temperature. And of course the other is that you're introducing water into a data center, which it takes, some people are just never going to do that. In this case, a lot of thought went into this to reduce the risk. My personal experience from being in this business, the biggest risk for water in a data center is condensation. By delivering warm water, it's way above the dew point. There is no condensation. There's no insulation. Your risk is eliminated entirely.
So what I think is interesting about it is, I don't think this is a watershed moment for data center design, and we're not saying that
nice pun.
that every data center design needs to change, but the thinking that went through, I think where we are, just to do the history of the world in 50 words or less, is first it was about reliability. Like, you lost your job in the data center because the thing went down. Then it was about capacity. You lost your job because you ran out of headroom. But I think now that there's increased pressure by folks outside of IT to explain the resource consumption that happens in the data center. Now there's a natural tension, because what affects the resources consumed in the data center is a decision that happens outside of that street address, right? The data center is inherently reactive, right? But somebody else orders something that gets dropped in a data center, and then that becomes the street address for resource consumption. But what LinkedIn has done, and again with Infomart, strategically positions as their developer, is to say, the way that everyone else does it isn't necessarily right for us. Now, it doesn't mean everyone else needs to go change the way to do that, and we have, because I think industrialization is fundamentally important for our industry.
But to your point, I mean, do you think sustainability is going to become a selection criteria in the future?
Absolutely.
I think it is. It already is now.
Do you think it's going to be a more important one in the future?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, but not for pure greenness.
Yeah.
It's because it helps the business, right? 10 years ago, people began talking about using LEED construction, which is, it's a set of conditions to be satisfied and set out by the U.S. Green Building Council. They're not really data center germane. I mean, most buildings are thought of as being efficient when they don't use much resource, whereas data centers, frankly, are highly resource intensive. Then came out a push for two different things. One is to be transparent about your operations. That's something else that the Uptime Institute works with. Another growing movement is the renewable power, right? And so this is another point that started with LinkedIn's org chart, and frankly ours too. We've always been a believer in choice, and we chose an area that gave us a direct access right. We're supplying this facility with hydropower, and that's through a contract. We didn't go buy a dam.
But what's interesting, John, is you're saying that it's not just about being a green gut person, but is it about money also?
Yes, and so all these things we just talked about, the building, the power, the transparency of operations, those are all means to an end, which is to satisfy the demands of the IT. And the one thing no one's really talked about to date is how efficient am I managing my IT? To Julian's point, this is an unforgiving job. If you have an outage or a lack of capacity, someone's going to get yelled at or fired or criticized. And so the new systems are trying to design to have resource that's available on demand, but not wastefully. And there's a tremendous incentive for that everybody gets more out of you get more yield out of your resource.
So it's more than just the building, it's about the operation as well.
Right.
And for example, the metric, which is a great metric, which is PUE, and I think the world of data centers has made an order of magnitude of improvement by just measuring something, inconsistencies aside, just simply the dialogue is helpful. That's only about to the right side of the decimal point. The demand itself is sort of, in my opinion, the undiscovered country. And I think we have collaborated with LinkedIn to design a system, and there's a whole bunch of controls they've introduced to make the most of their investment. And it had to happen together.
Right, and to your point, Brett, as you said, is sustainability a thing, and is it an influencer? I think we're there, and I think we're only seeing the beginning of their impact on how this happens. Look, IT doesn't have a great track record inviting new faces to the table, right? They tend to be closed off, secretive. Maybe that's the nature of the job, maybe it's the culture, whatever, that's what we have. But as I take efficient IT to the industry, I've been spending more time with corporate sustainability folks. And the recurring message is, wow, I went to production, or I went to network and was received with welcoming arms, and then I ran into the brick wall of IT. But that's not going to stop these people from developing their corporate-wide energy management plans, right? And so if you look at an organization that says, we can never be 100% renewable because we need to have instances all over the world, and I don't know what the power source is in Slovenia, but it's probably not very clean, just a weird example. But the point being is they're going to they're going to empower that and impress that upon IT, whether or not IT gets a voice at that table. And that could be potentially a key selection criteria.
And might it be that the preference is to go with the more sustainable, efficient operation, and if you can't, you have to give an explanation for why not.
Right, but I think less and less it's a preference, and more it's a corporate mandate, because it becomes a governance matter. I mean, to coin a phrase from the sustainability world, look at Volkswagen and BP and ask them the cost of not having a sustainability program in place.
Yeah, I think just the amount of investment in IT, you look at all the numbers, you look at the growth, people are looking at that and saying, this is resource intensive. And the simple question is, are you doing it right? Are you doing it responsibly? And I think the historic answer has been no answer, right? And I think most corporations want to behave responsibly, want to be seen as that, and they are adjusting their priorities as such.
Julian, you have a saying about efficient IT not being able to buy it. What was?
That's managed, not purchased. Okay. And I'd add to that it's managed, not mimicked. And it is, as John says, look, it's about the business drivers for efficient RT are cost savings, risk management, and innovation. And it's not just doing the right thing is great, but not too many people get paid to just do the right thing for its own sake. but it's more and more just,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a weird discussion to have in IT because IT lends itself or provides inherent efficiencies. It saves you a trip to the store, it eliminates printing presses, maybe you don't have to FedEx something, or whatever, courier, not to pick on FedEx, but historically it's been wasteful, right? I mean, asset utilization has been low, and there's a bunch of retorts around that, but we haven't done a good job of translating that message outside of our world. And so when the piece comes in the New York Times, you can't really blame them for some of their conclusions. Now, we can disagree with them, but we didn't have a platform or a broadcast mechanism to that. And I think the efficient IT story is, hey, in terms that everyone else is going to understand, not just the people who work in this industry, we're doing things responsibly and business consciously.
Well, and it's just pure financial sense too. If your electric bill was $10,000 a month for your IT operation, you might get one level of scrutiny. If it's $1 million a month, you're going to ask more questions. And I think this is about being prepared.
Right.
And I think, and that's just the energy cost. If we looked at the capital costs too, right? Running these things efficiently, you're going to get more out of them. It's not just, as I said, it's not just about being green for the sake of being better than thou. And I will say this, again, we're probably running out of time, but this data center, in my opinion, is I don't know if I use a watershed, it's a signature moment where the facility was built to the highest standards, managed to the highest standards, powered by renewable energy, and the IT has been certified as being among the most efficient in the world. That's a pretty good example for everybody else to mimic, imitate, or improve upon. And I think that's great.
Now, so if we look into Julian, so let's look into the future a little bit. I mean, do you think that sustainability and efficient operations are going to be the way everyone starts to run and manage their data centers?
So
I mean, John's kind of in front, but I mean, is John going to have a lot of competition?
Yeah, and that's a good thing because there's business advantage to it, right? I mean, if you look at the software as a service or the public cloud or what have you, they're creating business advantage through transparency into cost and resource consumption, which is forcing questions back upon the extant infrastructure guys and gals and saying, look, I can tell you with a F9 keystroke exactly what this workload is consuming. Can you do the same? And the answer for a lot of enterprises, I would hazard a majority, is that no, we don't know that. And so it's gonna create, and what the outside pressure is gonna drive the better behavior, right? Because there's, first of all, the third-party providers are controlling their cost of doing business, which again is the right thing. So they're doing it more efficiently because it makes sense for their business, and a good story comes along with it.
I think we're in the beginning of a change in process, right? All process requires feedback and reaction, right? And as we take a world of IT, especially IT operations, which has historically been closed for security or compliance reasons, and open it up a little bit, which is hats off to all the people who do that, you're going to see, okay, well, here's what we could have done better. And every time you refresh these assets, which happens fairly, frequent in terms of corporate, like every few years, they're doing something new, you have an opportunity to do it better, right? And I think to Julian's point, it starts with information. And then after that is, can you react, right? Just because we can't just be satisfied with knowing, right? When you asked the question about collaboration, the collaboration was on a design to be able to redirect resources based upon a constraint. A data center at the simplest form converts utility power, conditioned utility power into computing power, and then distributes over network. If there's a constraint in network, you have dead utilization. If there's a lack of power, you have dead utilization. If there's a lack of cooling, you have lower utilization. And so we, together with the mechanical systems and electrical systems and LinkedIn on the IT and network systems, have moved this around such that every time they sense those constraints, they can redirect load. And that was a conscious choice.
Great.
I think they're being more efficient by turning off that light right there too.
Saving energy right now.
Good job. So that's
the message is resonating. The message is resonating.
So with that, we'll wrap up. So thank you both for a really great discussion. If you have more questions, please engage us through the Bright Chalk channel. We're happy to answer any of your questions. I'm sorry, I'm not happy to answer your questions. These two will be. So with that, we'll sign off. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.